She was in her daughter's home that evening. She was with family. She was brought back to her own house by someone who loved her. And somewhere between the moment the lights went out and the moment her pacemaker stopped registering movement, someone who had been waiting in the dark took her. Nancy Guthrie is 84 years old. Her heart is fragile. The medication she needs to sustain that heart is not in her possession. She has been missing from the Tucson, Arizona area since late January 2026. Nearly 3 months have passed. Her family describes every day as agony and every night as long and sleepless and full of questions they cannot answer. Tonight, this report tells you what can be answered, and it tells you what the investigation, now with fresh federal involvement reviewing everything from the beginning, is working to find. The man who took Nancy Guthrie was not a stranger to her neighborhood when he took her. He had been there before. He was on video at her front door on January 11th. Investigators believe he was there on other days before that. He was learning. He was patient. He was watching when a vulnerable elderly woman came home from her family's house, when the lights in her home went off, when the street grew quiet. He was watching because he was planning, and on January 30th, when he had learned everything he needed to learn, he came back with a weapon and a backpack, and he completed what he had been planning. That is what this investigation has established, with a certainty that has not always been reflected in how the case has been communicated to the public. The planning is confirmed. The premeditation is documented in the footage. The question of who he is and where he went after is what the investigation is still answering. Tonight, we follow the answer along the route Annie Guthrie mapped, through the cameras she identified, through the data that the vehicles present that night are still holding, and through the fresh federal review of 3 months of evidence that may finally find what has been waiting in plain sight. Nancy Guthrie's family is waiting. Her community is afraid. And the investigation is moving in a direction that, for the first time in weeks, carries the weight of genuine momentum. When you want to understand who took Nancy Guthrie, start with what he did before he took her, because what he did before reveals who he is. He did not see an opportunity and act. He did not pass her home and decide on impulse that this was the moment. He identified her as a target. He located her home. He observed her routine, and he came back more than once to build his certainty before he committed. That sequence of behavior is not the behavior of desperation or impulse. It is the behavior of calculation. Former investigators who have analyzed this behavioral profile have noted the specific function that each pre-crime visit serves. The first visit establishes the basic geography of the target location, where the entry points are, what the approach looks like, what the surrounding properties can see. Subsequent visits refine the operational picture. What time the occupant typically returns home, what time the lights typically go off, whether there is anyone else who regularly comes and goes, what the nearest intersection looks like in terms of camera coverage and traffic patterns. The January 11th footage is the documented confirmation of a process that was likely already several visits in. On January 11th, he appeared at the front door of Nancy Guthrie's home. He did not force entry. He did not act. He was there to confirm what he already believed he knew: the layout, the camera placement, the timing. And then he left. What happened between January 11th and January 30th is the period of final preparation. He had gathered his information. He had mapped his approach and his exit. He had established the timing window he needed, and he had assembled what he needed to complete the operation: the weapon, the backpack, the resolve to act on the night he had identified as the right one. Analysts who have noted the significance of the backpack have observed that it implies duration. A person who brings a backpack to the site of an abduction is prepared for a period of activity that follows the abduction itself. The backpack contains whatever is needed for the hours or days after the crime. That preparation reflects a plan that extends beyond the moment of taking to the management of what comes next, the transport, the concealment, the continuation of whatever the ultimate objective is. The human dimension of this pattern is something that no amount of forensic analysis can fully contain. Nancy Guthrie is 84 years old. She walks with a walker. She depends on others to transport her. She has a fragile heart and requires medication to maintain it. She is, in the assessment of anyone who knew her and of anyone who has followed this investigation, a deeply vulnerable person. The person who chose her as a target knew that. He surveilled her precisely because he was looking for a window of vulnerability. He found it in the late evening hours after she returned home from her family's house, in the quiet of a residential street, in the darkness after the lights went out. The family who loves her was with her that evening and then brought her safely home. The safety of that delivery was illusory because someone had been waiting for it. The map Annie Guthrie drew and shared is, when you understand what it represents, one of the most genuinely useful contributions made by a family member in this entire case. Annie Guthrie is not a professional investigator. She did not have access to police databases or forensic reports when she made the map. What she had was knowledge of her own community and the desperate motivation of a daughter whose mother had just disappeared. She put those two things together and produced something specific: a route, a possible path the person responsible took when he left with her mother. The map passed through a sequence of locations that, when examined individually for their surveillance camera coverage, constitute a network of potential evidence. That network has not been exhausted. It may still hold what investigators have been looking for. The elementary school that sits along the identified corridor is a building designed in the modern era, with security as a foundational consideration. The cameras on a school building in Tucson, or in any American city in 2026, are not decorative. They are part of a security infrastructure that covers the building's perimeter, its entry points, and the adjacent roads. Multiple cameras positioned at multiple corners of the building create intersecting fields of view. A vehicle traveling along the road in front of that school at any hour is captured by more than one of those cameras simultaneously. The combination of their footage, from different angles, gives investigators a composite view that a single camera cannot provide. The nail salon with an exterior camera provides a different kind of coverage. It is a private commercial camera, not an institutional one. Its technical specifications may differ from a school system's cameras, but its fundamental characteristic is the same. It points at the road. At 2 a.m. on the night in question, the road it was recording on did not have the daytime traffic of a normal business day. It had the quiet of a residential commercial district in the deep hours of the night. Every vehicle on that road at that hour was exceptional. Every exceptional vehicle was recorded. The footage either exists and has been analyzed, or it was overwritten before investigators reached it. The understanding of why investigators have not yet publicly confirmed footage from the corridor is important for framing what fresh federal review means. There are 3 possibilities. The footage was never there, the cameras along the route were not recording, or the route itself was not used. The footage was there but has been overwritten. Standard commercial security systems overwrite their recordings on a cycle, and if investigators did not reach those systems quickly enough, the relevant footage is gone. Or the footage exists and is in investigators' hands as active evidence that has not been publicly released because it is part of an ongoing investigation. The third possibility is the one that carries the most investigative hope. If footage from the corridor exists and is being held as active evidence, it means investigators have something they have not disclosed. That something could be the vehicle, the route confirmation, the direction of travel that narrows where he went after. Any of those elements, held as active evidence rather than released, would explain why the investigation has maintained the posture of active pursuit rather than an admission of having reached a dead end. Former investigators and analysts who have addressed this case have consistently expressed the belief that cameras along the route captured something. The density of commercial and residential surveillance in a modern American city, even at 2 in the morning, is such that a vehicle making a series of turns through a specific corridor is statistically likely to appear on at least one camera that was recording. The statistical probability of complete camera avoidance, even for a careful and prepared suspect, decreases as the distance traveled increases. At some point along his route, a camera that he did not know about captured something. The Fresh Federal Review is the systematic search for that camera. If you have been following Nancy Guthrie's case since the beginning, this is the moment to make sure you will be here when that camera is found and what it shows becomes known. Subscribe so you don't miss what may be the most significant development this case has produced. The night Nancy Guthrie was taken, 2 vehicles were in the area that carried data about her final known movements. Both of them may still hold information that has not been fully extracted or analyzed. The Uber that transported her that evening generated a record. Rideshare companies maintain detailed trip data, the precise GPS location of every point along the route, time-stamped to the second. The identity of the driver, the vehicle he drove, any camera systems it contained, and the navigation history of its movements that night. The pickup location, the drop-off location, the time between them. Every deviation from the most direct route, every stop, every moment the vehicle was stationary when it should have been moving. That data, obtained through federal legal process, is a document of the specific window of time and the specific geographic corridor within which the most important events of that night occurred. It establishes the exact moment Nancy Guthrie arrived at Annie's home. It establishes the exact moment her transport concluded and she was inside her home. It places the chronological anchor for everything that followed. If the Uber vehicle was equipped with a forward-facing camera, that camera's footage from the transit could include imagery of the surrounding streets, any parked vehicles that were unusual for the time and location, and any movement in the neighborhood consistent with a person waiting in a parked vehicle for someone to come home. A camera looking forward through a windshield at 2 in the morning on a residential street is not looking at a dense field of activity. It is looking at a quiet street. And on a quiet street, anything out of the ordinary is visible. The vehicle operated by Annie Guthrie's husband that evening, which brought Nancy Guthrie home, carried its own data. Modern vehicles equipped with navigation systems record the routes they travel. The internal computer of any modern vehicle records engine events, door events, and movement. If the navigation system was active, it recorded the specific route traveled that night. If the vehicle had a camera system, that system recorded the same quiet residential streets the Uber camera would have recorded, from a different position and at a different time. The impoundment of Annie and her husband's vehicle was a standard investigative step that placed the vehicle in investigators' possession. The question of what was extracted from it and what was found has not been publicly confirmed, but the investigative principle is clear. Vehicle data does not lie, cannot be altered retroactively, and records the objective reality of where the vehicle was and what happened to it with a precision that human memory cannot match. The convergence of these 2 vehicles' data, covering the same geographic area on the same night within the same general window of time, creates a picture of the neighborhood's movement activity in the hours surrounding the abduction. That picture, combined with the footage from cameras along Annie Guthrie's route map, and with the data from any other vehicle or camera system that captured the area, is what investigators are building when they review the accumulated evidence with fresh perspective. The individual responsible for Nancy Guthrie's disappearance was in that neighborhood that night. He arrived somehow, and he left somehow. Both of those movements are recorded, at least partially, in the data and footage that exists from that night. The Fresh Federal Review is the systematic process of assembling those recordings and finding where his vehicle appears. When it appears, the investigation changes, not because a single piece of footage is sufficient to resolve a case, but because a vehicle identified in footage is a thread that investigators can follow. a make, a model, a partial license plate, a direction of travel. Any of these can be verified against other records, cross-referenced against the suspect's known movements and contacts, and built into the evidentiary case that leads to an identification. The story of this investigation is, at its center, the story of an 84-year-old woman who did not deserve what happened to her, and of the people around her who have done everything in their power to find her. Her daughter Savannah has spoken publicly in ways that carry the full weight of what she is living with. Her daughter Annie drew a map and shared it with her neighbors because that is what you do when your mother is missing and you have knowledge that might help. Annie's map has not yet publicly resolved the case, but it has provided investigators with a specific, geographically grounded theory about where the evidence they need might be found. And that theory is being actively pursued by people with the resources and the fresh perspective to pursue it effectively. The person who took Nancy Guthrie planned carefully. He surveilled before he acted. He returned to the neighborhood multiple times before January 30th. He arrived on January 30th with equipment that reflected completed preparation. He masked his identity from the moment he appeared at the front door. He chose a route when he left that was designed to minimize his exposure. But careful is not perfect. Planning is not the same as invisible. The cameras he did not know about were recording. The vehicles present that night were generating data he did not know would eventually be reviewed. The biological material left at the scene of the confrontation is in a federal laboratory. The hair recovered from inside the home is being compared against reference profiles. The GPS and navigational records of every vehicle in the relevant area at the relevant time are being examined by investigators who did not build their assumptions about this case in the first days, and who therefore approach those records without the constraints of those assumptions. The fear that lives in Nancy Guthrie's community is grounded, and it is real. An unsolved crime creates a persistent sense of exposure in everyone who lives near where it happened. That exposure does not resolve until accountability arrives. The accountability has not arrived yet. But the investigation has never been more actively pursuing it. The $1 million reward available for information leading to Nancy Guthrie's recovery is the financial expression of a family's refusal to stop. It is money that exists in the world and that changes the calculation for anyone who has seen something, heard something, or knows something about where Nancy Guthrie is or who took her. You do not need certainty. You need information. The investigators will determine its significance. The cameras along the route Annie Guthrie mapped are the investigation's most specific, publicly known target right now. The federal review of accumulated footage and data is the mechanism through which those cameras are being searched. The vehicle that a Ring camera spotted 2.5 miles from the home, in the corridor the route map identifies, is being re-examined with the fresh eyes that were not applied to it when it was first collected and dismissed. Every piece of this investigation connects to every other piece. The pre-crime surveillance visits connect to the operational planning. The operational planning connects to the night of the abduction. The night of the abduction connects to the route. The route connects to the camera network. The camera network connects to the footage. The footage connects to the vehicle. The vehicle connects to the person. That chain exists. The investigation is working through it. Nancy Guthrie is 84 years old. She has been away from her family for 3 months. She has been without her medication. Her heart is fragile. The family that loves her has done everything it can do from the outside of an investigation to keep the search alive, the attention sustained, and the resources flowing toward finding her. The map Annie Guthrie drew in the earliest days, sitting in the agony of not knowing what happened to her mother, is one of those contributions. It pointed somewhere. The investigation is following where it points. Somewhere along that route, in a camera that was recording in the quiet of an early morning in late January, the answer may already be waiting. The federal review is looking for it. The family is waiting for it. And the community that has been afraid for 3 months is hoping, in the way that only people who have waited this long for something know how to hope, that it is close. The community around Nancy Guthrie's home is not merely a backdrop for this investigation. It is an active participant in the investigation's potential resolution, whether or not its members have yet recognized themselves as such. Every person who lives within the geographic area of the relevant camera network is a potential witness. Not necessarily a witness to the crime itself, but a witness to the patterns that make a specific vehicle, a specific person, or a specific behavioral anomaly recognizable. Residents of a neighborhood know which cars belong there and which ones are unusual. They know which people walk the streets at normal hours and which faces are unfamiliar. They know the rhythms of their block in ways that even the most attentive investigator cannot replicate from external observation. The suspects surveilled Nancy Guthrie's neighborhood multiple times before January 30th. Each visit was an exposure. He was in the neighborhood on January 11. He may have been there on other days. Each time he was there, he was visible, potentially, to neighbors who were present during those visits, without knowing what they were witnessing. A car parked in an unusual location, a person walking slowly near a specific house, a vehicle that was present on one day and again another day. Any of those observations, held by a neighbor who has not yet connected them to this investigation, could be part of the evidence that identifies this suspect. The community's fear, expressed by neighbors who have spoken publicly about feeling exposed and afraid, is an emotional reality that also has an investigative function. Fear motivates attention. People who are afraid of a threat in their community pay closer attention to what is unusual in that community. They notice the car they haven't seen before. They remember the face that didn't fit the neighborhood. And they are more likely to call the investigator's tip line when they notice something, because the fear of what might happen next if they don't is a motivator that complacency is not. The sustained public attention to this case, maintained in part by a family that has refused to let it fade from view, means that the community has been reminded regularly of what happened and of what might still be true. The person responsible has not been caught. He may still be in the area. He may look like someone they have seen. The more that reminder is present, the more likely it is that a neighbor who has been sitting on an observation they weren't sure was relevant will decide to report it. The tip line exists for exactly that decision. The reward exists to ease it. The investigation exists to evaluate it. Every observation is worth submitting.
There is a human quality to what Annie Guthrie did with the map that deserves to be acknowledged directly, because this report is partly about the human dimension of this case, and that dimension never more present than in a daughter's act of drawing a route and sharing it with her neighbors because she had nothing else to offer and she had to do something. She is the daughter of a missing woman. She is the sister of someone whose public visibility may have caused this. She is the wife of a man whose car was impounded as part of an investigation into a crime that happened in her mother's home. She is living inside this case in a way that none of the analysts or commentators or investigators who study it from the outside are living inside it. She is living it while also trying to contribute to solving it. The map she drew was not a professional document. It was not the output of a trained investigator applying systematic methodology. It was the output of a daughter who knows the streets around her mother's home and who, in the first desperate days of the search, took that knowledge and tried to convert it into something useful. She was not asking to be believed on the basis of expertise. She was asking to be taken seriously on the basis of being someone who cares about the outcome more than anyone and who has knowledge that might help. The investigative lesson of this case, the one that will be taught and repeated, is that dismissing this kind of contribution is a mistake that has costs, not because family members are always right, they are not, but because knowledge of a geography shared by someone who lives in it and travels it daily is a specific and valuable form of information that professional investigators who are new to an area do not automatically possess. Annie Guthrie knows those streets. She knows which route makes sense if you are leaving a specific address heading in a specific general direction at a specific time of night. Her map reflects that knowledge, and that knowledge has value. The fresh federal investigators reviewing the accumulated evidence are looking at her map with fresh eyes. They are looking at the camera positions along it. They are looking at the vehicle on the ring camera that falls within its corridor. They are asking, with the advantage of everything the investigation has accumulated since that map was first drawn, whether it points somewhere that has not yet been fully examined. That examination is happening right now, and for the family that has been waiting for 3 months, the knowledge that someone is finally looking in the direction Annie pointed is a form of hope that, however fragile, has not yet been extinguished